we're starting today with the color wheel. The color wheel is really basic. You want to print this out and get this started. We're going to start with the basic vocabulary words that you need to know in order to understand some pretty basic components of color theory. Number one is the list the primary colors. The primary colors are the three colors that you need to make all of the other colors. And we've got red, yellow, and blue. You'll notice that on your color wheel, the red, the yellow, and the blue are all in capitals, and they create a triangle. Okay, they're the most important colors that we're using. When we're mixing, we're going to be using the ultramarine blue and the primary magenta for our red, and then the primary yellow for our yellow. If you ordered the set that was on Blick material, just so you know. If you try to pick the primary colors, if it says primary red, primary yellow, primary blue in your group, but if they have a choice between an ultramarine or a cobalt blue, choose the ultramarine. If they have a choice between an alizarin crimson and a primary magenta, choose the primary magenta. And that makes a difference in mixing the color purple and mixing the color turquoise. So that's why we want to use these colors. And then we have black and white, which are technically not colors. They're values. We use these colors in order to shade or tint. Okay? So the secondary colors we're going to be making by mixing the two primaries together. So if I take the red and the violet and put, or excuse me, the red and the blue and put them together, I'm going to get a secondary color, and that color is going to be violet. So the secondary colors are halfway in between the two primaries, and they're what happens when you mix them together. Okay. So if I take the blue and the yellow, I'm going to get a secondary color, which is green. I'm going to fill that out there. And then if I take the yellow and the red and mix them together, I'm going to get a secondary orange. So the secondary colors are violet, green, and orange. And then the intermediate colors, or sometimes called the tertiary colors, are the hyphenated colors. And they're a primary plus a secondary. So if I take the primary blue and then I add the secondary green, I get blue, green. They're the hyphenated colors. Okay. If I take a primary yellow and get the secondary green, I get yellow green. Okay, primary yellow and secondary orange, I get yellow orange. Primary red, secondary violet, I get red violet. Primary blue, secondary violet, I get blue violet. Let's see, and then primary blue, secondary green, I get blue green. So these are all of the colors on the color wheel. In the intermediates are the ones that are hyphenated. Okay.
You have blue green twice, Professor.
Oh, I do. Which one did I skip? Let's see.
I think you skipped red orange.
Red orange. Thank you very much. Awesome.
But the paint set you recommended is still coming in for me. So I bought my own acrylic set.
That'll be fine.
But at the same time, it's ultramarine blue, chrome yellow, fire red. I immediately mixed the purple and said that looks awful.
Right. So if your fire red has yellow in it, is that the only red you have?
That is the only red acrylic I have. Okay,
so you might want to use your watercolors to mix your violets. Unfortunately, fire red has yellow in it, so it makes it it's really difficult to make purple. Okay, we'll get to there. Don't worry. So what do you add to a color to tint it? And the answer is we add white to tint a color. Okay, and I know it seems like it would be black because we say tinted windows, but we think darker windows, but it's actually white is your tint. This is your pinks. Your light blues are going to be tints of the color. And then for our shades, we use black. And the reason for that is if you're painting shadows, like for example, you're painting grass and it's under a tree, you're going to add black to the grass that's under the tree where the shadow is to make it look like it's shaded. So that's the purpose of the terminology there, why the shade is where you add black to make a shade. Okay, so going around the outside, first of all, I've got a big pitcher of water that I'm going to use. And I've got lots of cups so I can clean, and a big pile of towels here, or rags work well too either. And I'm just gonna pour out real quickly 3 cups of water so that I can clean, and I'm going to be cleaning my brushes constantly. Okay, and you really have to do that in order to keep your, especially with the color wheel, because you're going to be using colors, and you need your colors to be pure on the palette. Okay, so I'm going to start off with just painting my primaries in first: red, yellow, blue. If you want to use Connor, if you want to use your watercolor red instead of your acrylic, that's fine. You can mix acrylic and watercolor together. It doesn't hurt anything. So I'm just going to very quickly paint the red. And these are, I'm not so concerned about whether or not these look great or they're to the edges. I'm more or less concerned that you understand the color theory. Okay, I'm going to wash it off. And then I'm going to go to the yellow. And again, when I'm washing it off, I'm going to make sure that I stir it in the water for a while. The water's going to turn pink, and then I'm going to let the water soak off the brush until it's clean. Okay. Yellow, which I know it sounds silly to say that, but if you get just the tiniest bit of red in the yellow, it's going to turn it orange. So you can switch brushes. That's another way to keep it really clean, is just to switch brushes in between. But when I clean off my brush from the yellow paint, I'm going to clean and use a fresh thing of water so I don't contaminate it. And I'm going to make sure I keep cleaning until all the paint is off the brush. And sometimes you have to wipe this metal part called the filial too. Okay. And then blue, which I'm using my ultramarine blue. Okay. Okay. All right, while I have this here, I'm gonna make a little pile of white, and I'm gonna do my tints next. I know it sounds weird to do them next, but it'll go a little faster. So my tints are just when I add white to my colors. I'm gonna put a little dot of white next to my original color, like that. And I'm going to take my one dot of the yellow. I don't need much. I'm gonna use this tinier brush and mix my tint of yellow with one dot of yellow, and just fill up that, use that whole white blob to make my tint of yellow. And that's going to give me like a light buttery yellow color. You have to have way more white than yellow to make it turn this buttery color. So that's why we take just one dot of the yellow and mix it into the white. The rule always is to take the stronger color, the stronger pigmented hue, and mix it into the lighter color, because the lighter color, the white, isn't as inherently powerful, and it will, it takes piles and piles of white to turn this lighter, but it only takes one dot of yellow to make this into a nice, beautiful light yellow. So that's the same principle we're going to use for all of these. So after I wash off my brush, I'm going to switch to red. I'm going to take one dot of the red and go into my big pile of white here to make pink, to get my tint of red. And then I can paint in my tint here. Okay. Washing it again all the way each time. I'm also going to use a progressively smaller brush as I get to the center, just to make it easier to fit in the wheel. One dot of blue will change that whole pile of white paint into a tint. Okay, and I've got my light blue. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is make a shade. So again, I'm going to wash my brushes. I'm going to do a dot of black somewhere near. I'm not touching the white. So I'm going to start off with the red on the side, and this, because the black is so dark, I'm only going to take one dot of the black into my red on the side. It does not take very much black to turn it into this rich, dark brick red color. Okay, and that's going to be my shade of the red. When I paint it, you can see that it looks kind of like a dark brown gray color. Okay, and our shades are going to look like that. Okay, and I'm using a skinnier brush to make it easier. Again, washing it off. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with the blue. I'm going to take a big little blob of blue, just one tiny dot of the black to mix it together to get a shade of the blue. And it's going to give me a beautiful kind of gray, blue-gray color, dark blue color. Okay, and then this one for the yellow especially, I'm going to grab a new brush and I'll show you why in a second. Notice I'm grabbing from the yellow here off to the side, and it's really going to take very little black, if any, just tiniest amount in order to turn this whole thing into a shade of yellow. Okay. And it almost looks green. Shaded yellow almost looks green. Notice it takes a little while too on the palette to get your color to mix until you can sort of perceive both the lights, mediums, and darks within the color. Okay. And the color family, the hue itself. When we talk about color family and hue. So each one of these colors, the color yellow, all of the yellows that are within that family of colors are called hues. So even if it's a light yellow, a dark yellow, this dark yellow is very different than this buttery light yellow, but they are part of the same color family, the same hue. Okay, now we're going to do the secondaries. We're going to take the primaries and mix them together. And I've kept my primaries pretty clean on the outside so here, so I can sort of move into the central palette. So I'm going to mix my red, okay, together, and then my blue to make violet. Okay, you'll notice violet takes a while to mix. It's going to look pink before it looks like a true purple, true violet color. And you just have to go back and forth before it turns that sort of eggplant violet. And I'm not so concerned with you filling up the whole box. I just want you to experiment and practice and get those colors, make it easier to see. Now, once I have my violet, right, if I want it to be red violet, I'm going to take my violet and drop it into the red to turn it into that red violet color. I'm going to have to refresh my paint a little bit. So if you look at the red violet color, it's kind of a raspberry color. It looks a lot like a raspberry. When I look at it, I can perceive both the red and the violet. And that's one of those things that you have to really mix until you can see both the red and the violet. Now, what Connor was talking about was that if you have a red paint that's not a primary red, if it says fire red, for example, or if it says alizarin crimson, it has a little bit, it's more of a tomatoey, it's actually a red orange. And so it's very hard to mix violet if you have they have sort of a non-primary red or non-magenta red. If you want to use your watercolors instead, you can just mix using the watercolor, and you can mix watercolor and acrylic together and it doesn't hurt anything. So if your purple looks wrong and it's because your acrylic isn't good, just switch to watercolor. And you can mix that in with your violet and it'll still turn it into that red violet. Okay. That's a cheating way to do it, but it works.
Mix the red paint and the blue paint
together to get violet, okay? And then I'm gonna take my violet and add more red to it to make red violet. Okay, so I'll do it again so you can see. I'm gonna take my red and my blue, red and blue. Okay. When I'm mixing, for this one, I'm gonna mix up a pile of violet and then I'm gonna add more blue to it so I have a blue violet here. Because blue violet is going to be violet with a little more blue than red, okay? So again, I'm gonna take and make the violet in the center here. Okay. Until it turns a really rich purple, which I can see on the side that it is. The thing with mixing colors is that putting red plus blue together, it only is gonna make violet if you sit there and mix it until it turns violet. Okay, and also you have to make sure that you have the right red and the right blue. But Once I get the violet, right, I paint this part, the regular violet, but now that I'm ready to make it into blue violet, I'm gonna make a pile of, I'm gonna add more blue to this side, and then I'm gonna take my blue and violet and mix them together. Actually save this, so that I'm taking a scoop of the violet here and then adding it to the blue. So when I look at the blue violet here, it looks almost like a navy blue. And that's the blue violet color that we're looking for. When I look at it, it looks blue and it looks violet. Okay, so just like I made my tints before, I'm going to go next to my piles of color that I already have mixed up in order to paint my tints. So for blue violet, I'm going to wash the brush a little bit, get it less full, and then just one dot of the color with the white is going to turn it into a light blue violet, and then mix it back and forth until it looks right. I'll get a nice blended color. That's my light blue violet. And notice it's slightly different than my light blue. Okay. Wash it off again. Each time washing it off, you just got to really keep it clean in order for it to work and look good. When you're painting a painting, you rarely change brushes this often, but it's the color wheel is just that way. Okay. And so for my light violet, I've got my original violet here, right? And then I'm going to add my white to my original violet. Or actually, I go back first. I'm going to add bring one dot of the violet over here. And that's my violet. And it looks like I got too much blue on there, so I'm going to add a little more of this in. You can always go over it till it looks right. Okay. And then I'm going to switch. I've got my little pile of red violet here. And I'm going to add white here. To make light red violet. Okay. And for shade, it's, you know, wash it off. We've got some of this blacks left. I'm going to take one dot of the black and go into that big pile of red violet here to make my shade. Got a little too much water here. Okay. Same thing with my regular violet. I'm going to take one dot of the black and go into my violet here to make a dark violet. And then finally, one dot of the black into the blue violet, which is this one. Adding a little bit of blue, a little bit of black to that violet. And that's going to give me the blue violet shade. Okay. All right. So we're ready to move on to the greens here. So we've got a big pile of blue here. I'm going to use that. And then I've got yellow here. So I'm going to mix my yellow and blue and green over on this side here. So I'm going to start with my clean brushes. And so you just got to wash a lot. It's just the way it is. Okay. So yellow is not as powerful as blue. Okay. It's obvious to see it's a lighter, brighter color. So we just need mostly yellow here. And then tiny, tiny, tiny dot of blue. I'm going to grab a clean brush here. And one tiny dot of blue is going to turn this whole pile of color into green. If it looks too yellow green, I can always add a little more blue. But you want to add it in slowly until it turns green. Okay. So right here's the green. Now, as you can imagine, for the yellow green, it's because this is so much more powerful than the yellow, you want to just take one tiny, tiny dot to mix with the yellow to give you your yellow green. So on the side here, I'm going to get a little bit of yellow green. It's sort of a highlighter color. Sometimes it's called chartreuse. So they're neon green. It's a really acidic looking color. It's very intense. Okay. And then to do our tints of the color, I've got a little bit left of that white yellow. I can add that into my yellow green to make a yellow green tint here. And then for my more pure green, I'm just going to take a little bit of that green that I've mixed up here and then add that into the tint that I've already started here, okay, to make my green tint. Okay. And then the same thing is going to be true with the shades. You always have to go back to the pure color and then add black to the pure color rather than going, you don't want to give any white in your green to mix up your shade of green. And then when you're yellow green, same thing, you don't want any, I'm just adding a little more yellow to it. And there's no white at all in order to get my dark shaded yellow green. Okay. For blue green, I'm going to grab some of the blue from this side that I have here. And some of the yellow here. Okay. I'm going to start by very slowly kind of mixing them together until I get a blue-green color. It's okay to have more blue because it's supposed to be blue-green. And you're going to get an indigo blue-green. It sort of looks like a denim color, or it's a sort of looks like blue jeans a little bit. Okay. If it needs a little more blue, do it. Looks a little too greeny to me. I'm gonna add a little more blue. Sometimes called ocean blue or cerulean blue. Okay. And then same thing with my tints. I'm gonna add a dot of white. And then our shades will add a dot of black. Blue-green doesn't really look like blue-green until you add white to it to create the tint, because the color turquoise, right, is sort of a light blue-green. Now, having said that, turquoise is one of those colors, just like violet, and I know this is probably what Connor's gonna say. I'll get there. If you want to switch your color to a blue primary cyan and add a little bit of that to your blue-green because it looks too green, you can do that, and you'll notice that your blue primary cyan is a little brighter, and it's going to create a more vibrant turquoise. Yes. Connor, do you go ahead and have a question?
I'm trying to work with the watercolor, but I don't have watercolor tubes. I have the dots, and it is an exercise in hair pulling frustration to get any significant amount of color to work with in order to actually mix.
Just use the primary, the colors that you have. I mean, I understand that some of it is the brand of the paint. Like if the brand is off, it's going to look like turquoise is one of those really frustrating colors, and it is much easier to mix your blue-green if you've got the cyan. Okay, so if you're mixing blue and green and it doesn't look right with the ultramarine, if you happen to have cyan, it's going to make it look more truly blue-green. But if you don't have cyan, it's going to be harder to mix your turquoise. And I understand that. I'm just showing you that, like, one of those things that's weird about paint is that in theory, what happens isn't always the same as what happens in practice. And one of the reasons that artists and especially painters spend a lot of time figuring out what colors they like and like the reason why when you go to the art store, there are 15 different blues to choose from is because, you know, there's Elijah put a color wheel that he uses when painting that might help up as a JPEG to see what you're matching, if anybody wants to see that. Thank you, Elijah. But it can be frustrating when you're first getting to know which colors that you know need more, which blue makes turquoise, which blue makes violet, which yellow makes the most vibrant orange. And a lot of it is trial and error. It's figuring out with your own paint kit what works well, and what doesn't work well. And so this is practice. Again, it's designed to just help familiarize us with how the color wheel works. And it's going to be practice. So I'm not expecting it to be perfect. So don't sweat it. Just do the best you can. And I know Connor's like, but I want it to be perfect. I understand. That's your personality. I get it. It's a good quality.
It's just, yeah, the chrome yellow and fire red are both the yellows and the reds I have. And
Well, that's okay. I mean, you know what? It just happens. You got to just kind of adjust with what you got. I'm going to make my tint for the turquoise a little lighter because I think it's a little dark. My blue-green here, okay? And then for my shade of the blue-green, again, wash off my brush, start with the black, and then add it to my blue-green here. And actually the shade of blue-green is a really beautiful color. Gorgeous. Okay. I'm gonna flip it around and I'm gonna focus on our yellow oranges. And some of you are probably wondering, can I just cheat and use my yellow orange that's in my, no, don't try. Try mixing it once, that's the purpose of this. But yes, when we go on to later, you can, when you're making your own creative paintings, you can always use a shortcut that's in your paint kit, that's fine. But for today, we wanna just practice. So it's really more about getting used to the paints and what we can get them to do. Okay, I'm actually gonna start with red orange first here because it takes less paint to mix. And mix it over here on the side. And red orange is like this tomatoey orange. It's like that fire red that you're using, Connor. So that's gonna be my reddish orange here. And then in order to make it, turn to it until it turns into like a tangerine color. But before I do that, I'm going to tint it out so that I have a little bit of white to the side. And that's going to give me my tint of orange. One of the things that you're going to notice about orange is that when we go through the red oranges and the oranges, when we get to the tints, we're going to be getting into pale looking skin tones. And when we get into the shades, we're going to be getting into dark looking skin tones. Every human being is a variation on one of the oranges. This is my tint. Whether it's more of a yellow orange, more of a red orange. We're all variations of that sort of flesh and blood that is programmed into that color. If we look at everybody's skin tone, it's all related. When we get to the shade part, so we've got our yellow orange here, we're going to add the dot of black, and you're going to see what I mean. When I add one dot of black to this orange, it's going to turn the whole thing into a beautiful brown skin tone. And so when you're painting skin tone, red orange makes a beautiful base for all the highlights and darks within a skin tone. Okay. We're going to go to orange, so that what I'm going to do is take the red and the yellow and mix them together until I get, it's going to, oops, that I don't want. I kept it out of the paint, which is good. So I've got my orange here. I was going to say until it turns into a sort of tangerine looking orange. And actually this one looks a little more yellow than orange. That's my yellow orange. I'm just going to go ahead and paint that first. Yellow orange is kind of a sunflower color. Okay, let me do that first. Now I'm going to add white to this yellow orange on the side here. And that's going to give me my tint. It takes a lot of white though, huh? Okay. And then for the shade, again, very little black is going to turn that whole pile into a dark sunflower color. Okay. For the orange, I've still got my yellow orange. I'm just going to add more red to it to make it more of a pure orange. So this is when you have to balance it back and forth. It has to be not as red as the red orange and not as yellow as the yellow orange. It has to be, I always try to think of it as like, imagine the perfect tangerine in your mind. And when you hit it, you'll go, yes, that's orange. And it takes a little bit of pushing back and forth until it turns orange. I think the thing about color that I did not understand when I first learned to paint is that the more time you play here on the palette, the better it's going to look here on the paper. And it took me a little while to figure that out. And it wasn't until I was in college and I was sitting next to a girl that was in a sorority who was really beautiful. She actually won homecoming queen that year. Her name was Mary Jo, because my name's Mary Anna, so I remember her name because we sat next to each other, and the teacher would call her Mary Anna and me Mary Jo every day. He got our names mixed up. But she was amazing at color, and she was not an art major. And I was pissed because I was an art major. She was taking this class for fun. And my instructor said, you know why she's better at color than you are? And I said, no, why? And he said, because she spends more time putting together outfits and shopping than you do. And the best colorists in the world are all work for the fashion industry. And that never, I never forgot that. That always, I think, gave me a lot of deep respect for people in that industry, because it takes so much talent to mix color and be really, really good at it. And I gained a lot of respect for Mary Jo also. Even though as a freshman in college with my combat boots on, I would never have thought that I would have anything in common with the homecoming queen. We wound up being, sort of like lab partners. We were often paired in projects together, and we became friends. All right, so that's what the finished color wheel looks like. This is, again, an exercise. You're done with it. You can upload it to the assignments tab. Hopefully that'll work. I'll check it to make sure it does. And if it looks like this, you're doing good. Don't worry about it being perfect. Just do the best job you can with the paints that you have. This is practice. And then next week, we're going to be applying this practice. And in the module, because we have a visiting artist, I'm going to drop all the videos for that demonstration lesson into a PowerPoint slide presentation for you guys, so that next week's painting class, you'll have to watch it, watching the video for the slide presentation, so that it's going to be a little less live and more slides, which I know that videos are not as engaging as live, but we're going to have a visiting artist, so we're going to have to prep for that. Does anybody have any questions about the color wheel?
When does it due?
Next week.
Okay, good.
If
I've
you're
had to
done with it
restart
now,
twice.
that's fine, and I understand that. So it's not due, you have until next week to turn it in. So if it takes you a couple times, that's fine. My goal this week is, you'll notice I've slowed down assignments quite a bit. I'm making them into 2 weeks instead of 1 week to make it easier for you guys to meet all your deadlines. A lot of students have been stressed out in the last 2 weeks, and I have been trying to figure out what the right pace is for my classes. And it seems like a 2-week, give the assignment and then give a couple of weeks to do it, so that there's time for struggle, a midterm progress check, and rather than trying to do it all at the same time. And that's something that I now know, because we have been in class now for 6 weeks, and it's become obvious to me that, if what I could normally do in 1 week in class is obviously is a little different than what I can do online with you guys. My goal is not to get through more curriculum, but to get through the curriculum in a way that feels good for you, so you feel like you learned a lot, but you're not stressed out. So I want you to learn, but I also don't want to stress you out too much, because I know that right now people are in incredibly stressful situations, and I've just been hearing some really stressful stories from students. So I want to make sure that it's not too slow to be boring, it's not too fast to be frustrating, that it's just right. So part of it is you guys they've been communicating with me, and I really appreciate that. You're always really good about texting me if you need help. So please continue to do that. If anybody wants to stick around after class to work or to ask any questions, I'll be here. I'm going to stop recording though. That's the end of the live part.